games in gaming salons and regulation of service providers. May I ask that you all please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Madam Secretary, has this workshop been posted in accordance with the open meeting law?
Yes, it has.
All right, then, Madam Secretary, let's proceed with our first public comment section.
This item is placed on the agenda to give the public an opportunity to comment on gaming-related matters. Anyone wishing to address the board may do so at this time. Comments by each person are limited to 3 minutes as a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction. If board members ask questions of the speaker, the time needed to address those questions will not count against the speaker's 3-minute time period. If speakers have any handouts or written copies of verbal comments to provide for the record, please hand them to the enforcement agent in the room.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Pursuant to Nevada open meeting law, matters brought to the board's attention during public comment may not be acted upon by the board, but of course we want to hear comments from the public as well as from my fellow board members. Let's first go to Carson City. We don't have video here, but Madam Secretary, is there anyone in Carson City wishing to give public comment this afternoon?
There is not.
All right, let's go here to Las Vegas. Is anyone in Las Vegas wishing to make public comment this afternoon? All right, seeing none, Madam Secretary, that'll close our public comment section, bringing us to our workshop items. Please go ahead and read into the record our first workshop item.
That's how you were. They're just having echo.
Our first item is the discussion regarding gaming salons, including without limitation, public access to gaming salons and required surveillance and security coverage.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Have we received any public comments regarding this first item on the agenda?
We have not.
All right, then, and since number 1 and number 2 actually both regard gaming salons, to not limit the public's comments, if they want to talk about one or the other, why don't you go ahead and read in our second item, understanding that both of these, again, are for discussion only.
The second item is the discussion regarding gaming salons, including without limitation, the games permitted to be offered in gaming salons pursuant to Nevada Revised Statute 463.4073 and Nevada Gaming Commission Regulation 5.200.
Thank you. And on this one, has there been any public comments received?
There has not.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I don't think this needs a lot of prefatory comments by me. It's kind of self-explanatory, but I will provide a little bit of background. Throughout the year, we always receive comments from the industry and even comments from board agents who will bring up different items of topics that'll say, I wonder if the board should consider this. These two items have been questions from the industry, and it's been over 20 years since the Gaming Control Board and the Gaming Commission have really took a deep dive into where gaming salons are at. And so I think the purpose of this, as you'll see, it says for discussion only. That's exactly what we're looking for today, is comments from the industry, comments from Gaming Control Board agents. And we're going to open this up. We have no drafted language, so we're not going to get into any legalese today. This is really the starting point for us to say it's been 20 years. How are gaming salons working? Are they good for the industry? Are they good for the state of Nevada? Do there need to be changes made that will be good for the industry, good for the state of Nevada? And if those changes are proposed, can the Gaming Control Board agents properly regulate the gaming salons the way we've been doing very effectively for the last 20 plus years? So with that, board members, if you have anything, I'll start with you. If not, I'd like to open it up to the public and anybody who wants to come forward and generally talk about these topics. And it could be either number 1 or number 2. Dr. Watkins, do you have anything?
I'm happy to hold my potential commentary or questions until we dive a little bit deeper into the discussions.
Great. Thank you. Judge?
Do I need to press?
Yeah.
that one there. Yeah, thank you, Chairman Hendricks. I don't have any specific comments right now. I'm looking forward to hearing from the industry, and I'm here to learn as well as try to administer and regulate the regulations and statutes. So thank you.
Thank you both. With that, then, I would ask if there's anybody in the public who'd like to come forward. Good afternoon, Ms. Whittemore. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. For the record, Chairman Hendrick, members Assad and Dr. Watkins, I'm Ellen Whittemore, Executive Vice President of Wynn Resorts. I'm pleased to introduce to you in the audience Jackie Crum, who is my successor as General Counsel and Secretary. I'm accompanied today by Charlie Stone. He's the Executive Vice President of Casino Operations and Marketing, and Lisa Caserta, Executive Director of Regulatory Compliance, both with Wynn Las Vegas, is with us today. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to discuss our thoughts on gaming salons and the very valuable part that they play in making Nevada the entertainment and gaming capital of the world. We all know that the concept of private gaming salons is not new, and I dare say every major operator has at least one private gaming salon. Over the years, the board and the commission have evolved their approach to gaming salons as the circumstances have required, and we thank you for the opportunity to again suggest evolution in the approach taken to these locations. We have 4 broad suggestions today. A couple of them will probably require regulatory amendments. A few of them may just require changes in interpretation. Our first suggestion is that licensees should be able to convert their private gaming salons to public gaming salons, irrespective of the location of the salon. Gaming salons not located adjacent to the casino floor should be able to function as both private and public gaming spaces, provided that when open as public gaming, there's appropriate signage to be displayed to direct the public to this gaming area. This is consistent with the current practice of the board to allow licensees to convert private gaming salons that are adjacent to the casino to public gaming salons with the appropriate signage. This is also consistent with the current position of the board to allow public gaming far from the main casino floor, such as the top floor of a casino resort, as is the current configuration at a major Las Vegas casino. Our second suggestion is that poker should be allowed in salons when the salons are in private status. I know there's some question as to whether the regulations in the statute allow that. And let me just go into that for a moment. Regulation 5.200, subsection 3, requires that at all times the gaming salon is open to the patron for play, that at least one table game be available for play. NRS 463-4073 provides that the regulations that govern gaming salons must provide that the gaming offered must include table games and may include slot machines. There is some question as to whether poker is a table game. Poker is defined as a card game in Regulation 1.60, but there's no definition of table game in any of the regulations. So it isn't clear from definitions if a card game is a subset of table games or is something distinct. Card games do have their own minimum internal control standards, but those mix referred to table games used in card games or tables used in card games, and also require compliance with table game mix in at least one circumstance. But irrespective of whether poker is a table game or a card game, there is nothing in the statute or the regulation that prohibits card games in private salons. There's nothing in the history of the regulation that we've been able to find that suggests that card games are prohibited in private salons. There is support in the regulation that more than table games, assuming poker isn't a table game, may be offered in a salon. Regulation 5.206, 200 subsection 6, states that a licensee may change the number, type, and configuration of the games or devices offered within the gaming salon subsequent to initial licensing, provided that security, internal controls, accounting, and all other requirements of this section, as well as all other applicable statutes and regulation of the commission, are fully satisfied. In that regulations, games is not limited to table games. Our third suggestion is that the board should reconsider the minimum credit limit and the time period a guest of a salon patron can wager in the gaming salon without the salon patron being present. Currently, a licensee may permit guests of the qualified salon patron to continue wagering during periods of time when the salon patron leaves the gaming salon for a period not to exceed 6 hours. We believe that it would be beneficial to change the time period to 24 hours to allow guests of a salon patron to continue gaming after the salon patron departs the salon. Reason for that is the salons must remain staffed while in private gaming. Allowing guests of a salon patron to continue gambling without the presence of the salon patron will help to earn taxable gaming revenue when the salon would otherwise be empty. Further, if poker is permitted in the gaming salons, the 6-hour time period will need to be extended, as poker games can take longer than 6 hours to complete. The other requirement of a minimum credit limit worked in the days when salons were limited to international gaming customers. It's not as appropriate today. For when the minimum of 300,000 is probably not an issue, but for many of our fellow operators, the $300,000 minimum limit is a little high. And then our fourth suggestion is that slot minimum bets should be set at the discretion of the licensee, just as it is allowed for table games within a salon. And with that, I'd like to turn it to the gaming expert to talk a little bit about the kind of clients that we're seeing and why our suggestions, we believe, will be beneficial to the state.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Whittemore. Good afternoon, Mr. Stone.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Ellen. To touch on a couple of the points that Ellen just made, and happy to answer any questions, but I think when it comes to private gaming salons and the ability to make them available for public as well, it really offers a new amenity, a new experience that can really drive loyalty for a lot of the guests that we're seeing coming to Las Vegas. So this includes high net worth individuals, celebrities and athletes, and others that may find benefit in having a bit more of a experience away from the main casino floor. There's also added security and safety benefits as well. When people are wagering high amounts of money, they don't always want to be in the center of the casino. I believe this could drive loyalty to the property, to the city, to the state, and create more frequency in trips and attract new customers as well. On the poker side, if it's okay to go into poker, there's been a lot of trends in poker over the years, increases and decreases. Right now, one of the things that I really see is an increase in high limit poker games. And I believe that these customers, from speaking with them, from speaking with some of our employees and understanding this piece of the business, the idea of being in a private gaming salon is very attractive for them. And I believe we can drive many more of these types of games to Las Vegas. And by hosting them in the private gaming salons, will provide a much better experience for the customer and again, create more loyalty here. I believe, especially when we talk about poker, there's a lot of money at stake on these games, and the ability to have a more secure and better security at these poker games is another benefit for everybody.
Would also add that if you're allowed, if the private salons are allowed to go into public, they're usually some of the nicest premises within a casino resort, and being able to use them public for things like tournament and special events, invitation only events, would also be beneficial to the state. And I think one of the things that when we've been talking about this is that these customers, the poker customers, for instance, I know the state doesn't get a lot of gaming revenue from poker, but you get the incremental spend that they spend when they're in the resorts. They go to our restaurants, they, are in our hotel room, they shop. And so while we may not see the same kind of revenue if poker was put in a private gaming salon that you might see from a traditional baccarat game, you are seeing incremental spend. And a lot of these poker players are also sports bettors, and so that they're able to go down and they wager on sports. There is some overlap between poker players and table games, but not to the level of some other kind of gambling. So there are a lot of benefits to allowing poker in the private gaming salons. And then there are also just those benefits from being able to convert the private gaming to public gaming as is appropriate under the circumstances with appropriate notification to the guests that it's public.
Thank you both for your comments. If you don't mind, I've got a couple questions, and I'm guessing the board members might as well. So while you're on the hot seat,
Happy to be here.
good.
My last time, I think.
And
So be
congratulations
kind.
on that
So be
too.
kind.
Congratulations on your long and distinguished career.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. You just mentioned something. I'm going to work backwards. You mentioned the fact that gross gaming revenue was highly impacted back when they talked in the 2001 session. Was the idea there's a certain number of whales that may come to what they were calling international gaming salons. That was supposed to really affect GGR. And 23, 24, 25 years later, we've crossed that threshold where gaming versus non-gaming revenue isn't always the end-all be-all. I enjoyed your statement where you're saying that that person may not bring a lot of direct tax revenue by playing poker, but if they come to town, I assume maybe we get them on the casino floor to play other games, but they're obviously going to eat and drink and hopefully have a good time in Vegas outside of the poker room. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, that is exactly. A lot of these poker games, particularly with celebrities and athletes, are in private homes in LA, and they're looking for a place where they can have those games, have the security, and have the amenities. When I joined Wynn Resorts in 2018, the clientele was either high rollers, whales, international customers, or convention goers. We anticipated in 2019 that there might be a change. And then in 2020 with COVID, we learned that we weren't going to have our convention goers and we weren't going to have the high rollers coming internationally. So the company embarked on a transformation to become a little, I'm going to not sound cool by saying cooler, because I'm sure that's not the phrase that we would be using, but we tried to become a little bit more relevant to the population, the younger population. So used to be that Frank Sinatra was in the casino. Now it's a mix, and it's not just Frank Sinatra. And all of those individuals, particularly the younger, very, very wealthy tech entrepreneurs and celebrities and guests, they come to be entertained. They come to play golf. They come to gamble a little bit. They go to our nightclubs. They go to our restaurants. And I think you're going to get that same sentiment from everybody here in the industry, that we have to learn to cater to the customers we have now, not the customers we used to have.
Thank you for that. And you touched on another question I had, which is probably the big question. The reason why in 2001 gaming salons were allowed is because it said under 463-0129, if the legislature determines otherwise, and the public policy behind that, it's been since the beginning of the 1955s. We're coming up on our 70th anniversary of the Nevada Gaming Control Board. So they made that step in 2001. Do you believe the four suggested revisions you're asking for, do they comport with the public policy of 463.0129?
I believe they do, because they will, we've always been able to have private gaming salons. And the purpose for having the private gaming salons was to encourage a certain type of client to come to the United States and to gamble within our premises. What we're suggesting is that it is now, we have a different type of clientele, and to encourage them to come to Las Vegas and to gamble, we have to loosen the requirements under the private gaming salon. We're still, most of us have far more public gaming than private salons. And of course, the board will still always have the ability to approve private gaming salons. So if you were to see a licensee who said, wow, I just kind of want to be private and I'm going to have a salon here and a salon there and a salon there and a salon there, you have the ability to say no. And so what I think the point is you want to allow the public to come in. You want to make sure primarily that gaming is free from corruptive influences and that they're secure. And I don't think any of the suggestions we've made today change those two primary concepts.
Thank you. And you did point out earlier, subsection 6 in the regulation of 5200 sub 6, that absolutely it's up to the Game Control Board and with the final say of the Gaming Commission to determine whether or not the size, location of any approved gaming salon. First, you got to get approved as a true application. And then if you make any changes, that's always up to the Game Control Board to review that application for the change. So that process, I don't think you're asking for any change to that, right?
No, none.
Good, great. And tell me, without getting in anything confidential or proprietary, you touched on the regulation, talks about the financial criteria of salon patrons. Currently, it's set at $300,000. You mentioned that may not be the same as when this reg was passed years ago. Do you have a number in mind? And I'm not putting you on the spot. You don't have to now, but you got a lot more visibility in what players are coming that would be using these salons. Is there a number that makes sense?
Well, there may be a number that makes sense for traditional games, a traditional gaming salon patron. It may be, and probably we would like to take a look at the number, but it may be that when you're in a private gaming and you're offering poker, that you actually don't need to have any credit limit, because most, minimum credit limit. Most poker players don't play on credit. They bring their cash and they exchange it for chips and they play with each other. And so it may not be necessary to have any minimum requirement whatsoever. And I think it's one of those circumstances with appropriate review by the board and commission that you could leave to the discretion of the licensee. As I mentioned, what we may be able to do with our clientele is maybe not what other people, and I think of my Northern Nevada competitors, they may want private gaming salons that don't have that maximum or minimum credit limit in order to offer amenities to their guests. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. We can never forget that any regulation changed by the commission is statewide.
Yeah.
And you brought up there may be some very large poker games going on, some very high stakes poker games going on in California that hopefully those players would want to come to Nevada, meaning could be Lake Tahoe, could be Las Vegas,
That's right.
could be other places. So yeah, that's a good point on what the minimum criteria would be. Yeah. And you mentioned, I think, slot play too. Was that your same line of reasoning on the regulation talks about a minimum of $500 bet? And I want to ask both you and Mr. Stone, is that happening? What do patrons say when they say, oh, you can be in a salon, but you got to play $500? Are these people like, $500 doesn't bother me, or I want to do less?
Well, I tell you that it doesn't actually happen very frequently that a slot player would play in a gaming salon. Usually it would be a member of the party of a table games player that's playing in that salon that we would want to offer a slot machine for, or for that player who may not be a huge slot player, but they're a very large table games customer that wants to play on the game of their choice. But I would also add that many years back, I believe that $500 slot machines were considered very high limit games on a traditional real style game. But today's high limit slot players are often playing much lower average bet sizes on video reel machines that are much faster in play. And so we have many players that would qualify for a gaming salon based on their total value each trip that have a much lower average bet than $500.
That makes sense, right? There's a lot more betting going on than a single pull for $500.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot more wagering. And are these people, when we say slot machines, that covers video poker? There's a lot of the things. It's not a pure handle pull or button pushing. Are they playing video poker up there?
Currently, they're playing video poker for high stakes in our high limit room, as well as traditional reel machines, and also this video reel product that I was just sharing. That seems to be a big growing segment with us and throughout the industry. And I believe that having the ability to bet $25 or $50 per spin at a much faster bet per spin ratio would benefit us in private gaming salons.
Got it. Yeah, thank you for that. I'm sure I've got more questions as they pop into my head, but while we've still got both of you, board members, did you have questions?
Yes, good afternoon to both of you. I do have a few questions for you. So would your proposal entail, as it relates to poker games, defining poker as a table game or something else?
Well, I think there's enough in the Gaming Control Act to define poker as a table game for certain purposes. I see my Deputy Attorney General on the screen here, and I will say that when I was in his position, if the board came to me and asked a question, I literally could find anything in that Gaming Control Act and regulation to support what they wanted me to find. And I would say that I think that there's enough support in the current statute and the regulation to support that poker is a table game for purposes of the regulation. But as a fallback, I think there's clearly enough support for the board and the commission to interpret the regulations to allow poker, even if it is a card game. I mean, I don't want to turn accounting on its head. I know that it's counted for as a card game. You know, we file tax forms as a card game, but I do think it could be interpreted as a table game. But irrespective of that, I do think it can go in a salon.
Okay, I guess because my next question, I think you anticipated that would be as it relates to gross revenue calculations, and I'm sure you're already aware under Reg 6.110 how gross revenue is calculated. For subsection 1, for each table game, gross revenue equals the closing table game bankroll plus credit slips for cash, chips, tokens, or personal payroll checks returned to the casino cage plus drop less opening table game, and you get the point.
Yeah,
right?
I get the point. Actually, I wrote that, so.
Okay, so you know. And so then under subsection 4, for each card game and any other game in which the licensee is not a party to a wager, gross revenue equals all money received by the licensee as compensation for conducting the game. So you see the issue.
So I do see the issue, and I think that I do think that there are changes that could be made to the regulations that would put poker into the table game category. I think procedurally, it would be much easier to address the question of whether poker can be in a salon, whether or not it's a table game.
Okay, and so do you think that requires a statutory change rather than a regulatory change?
No, I think it's a regulatory change.
So,
At most, because it's your regulation,
Mhm.
and your regulation says the statute says table games and may include slots, but then the regulations of the commission talk about games being in the salon and don't limit it to table games. And so I believe that you have the ability to interpret your statute and your regulation to say that poker is appropriate in a salon.
Okay, understood. Do you think it's a reasonable interpretation of the statute? Or I guess, let me ask this. Do you think it's a reasonable interpretation of the statute to limit the games that must be included to table games and maybe included the slot machines and nothing else?
I don't
Given
think,
that there's, let me add one more
Okay.
thing. Given that there's no, that the statute does not include including without limitation language.
yeah, but I think that's implied because it says may. It's not, it may include slot machines, must include a table games. It doesn't exclude by not having anything else in it because it talks about games. And it says must, you can have games in a salon and it must include table games and it may include slots because slots are a little bit different than table games, right? They're
Right.
gaming devices. So I think what they're saying is we want, and again, this is back in 2001, I think. And, you know, the concept was MGM at the time and the Aladdin wasn't going to be the Aladdin. They had a London club tower. And so they were talking about bringing in high net worth international players who were going to play Baccarat. So it was easy to say table games at the time. And then this is back in the days, little bit misguided at the time, but it was at the time that those high rollers might want to bring their spouse and their spouse wasn't going to want to sit at a table game, but the spouse might want to play a slot machine. So that was the discussion, but there's nothing in the statute, nothing in the regulatory history that precludes other games from being included.
Okay, and so I'm just gonna ask this really succinctly. So you don't think that the fact that it doesn't include the language, including without limitation, prohibits expanding that category to include poker?
I do not believe that.
Okay, understood. Thank you, Chair. I have additional questions, but I will turn to you.
Yeah, let me follow up on that. And I had just about left the Attorney General's office about the time this was coming in. And so I missed some of this in 2001. But if you look at 463.4073 sub 2B, that says the standards of operation for a gaming salon, including without limitation, policies and procedures governing B, the games offered.
That's right. That's right.
And then I know that the regs, we got into table games and slot machines and
right.
all, but I think clearly from a statutory standpoint, they said, leave this
Games.
to the commission, games.
Games.
Yeah, and then at the time, 23, 24 years ago, those games were table games and a slot machine.
You did better legal research than I did, Chair.
I don't know about that. Yeah, but the games offered.
The games. And I think under statutory interpretation, to get back to Dr. Watkins' question, I don't think that the without limitation is a requirement in a permissive.
I get that.
Okay.
Great. Judge, did you have questions for Ms. Whittemore or Mr. Stone?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Hendricks. Well, first of all, thank you for that presentation. I thought it was excellent. And Mr. Stone, thank you as well. Very informative. The first recommendation is for private to gaming. Second is poker to be included. Third is the credit limit should be eliminated or reduced. What was the fourth?
Well, in the limits was also the time. So reduce
6
the
hours.
6 hours, get rid of the 6 hours.
Right.
And the last was, as Charlie just commented, the video, slot machines, gaming devices, the $500 requirement should be lifted.
Okay, very good. So, I mean, anecdotally, I can relate to this. I remember in probably the late 70s, we would have, I was at the Dunes. Mr. Shanker was the owner, supposedly. Technically, he was Jimmy Hoffa's lawyer, as you all know. And he would have Mr. Khashoggi come in from Saudi Arabia. We had other sheiks coming in from all over the Arab Emirates and the Middle East. And he would just rope off the crap table for Khashoggi. and that was his private gaming salon. And you'd have people all around and everybody would gawk and want to take pictures and stuff like that. And then finally, I think he was actually giving them games up in his private suite. He did a lot of things that were maybe legal or illegal. I don't know if these regs were in the books, probably not at the time. The statute, I don't think was. So they've been doing what you're alluding to, catering to whales and high rollers. Michael Jordan would come in. It's public knowledge. Nothing here is being disclosed. It's not in the public arena. He would want private games when he was playing at the Mirage. So this is a great idea. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. Its time has long overdue. We need to do whatever we can to, as a regulatory body, to keep up with the changing of times. You've got billionaires in Silicon Valley who want to come here and entertain and play and have fun. As long as we, you know, obviously prevent the money laundering issues that are in the headlines these days. And there are mix and there are controls and compliance committees that'll oversee that as well. As long as those same guidelines and oversight applies to the private gaming salons, I see no problem with it. I think it's kind of ridiculous to have a $300,000 credit line. Why would you want to do that when you're possibly having billionaires who, for whatever reason, don't want to have a credit line? They may want to come in with front money. You may want to have people in the lower income brackets who want to participate, who can't afford the credit line, but would like the benefits of playing in a private area. So you've got, I'm in full agreement with reducing or eliminating completely the $300,000 limit. I don't see any purpose for it whatsoever. The poker to private, I'm in favor of that completely. Poker should be included in there. The statute 4073, it says may include slots, and they could have added may include poker as well. There's nothing prohibiting it. And under my experience as a judge, when you statute is not prohibitive, you can add to it. You can do whatever you want to it. If it's not excluding it specifically, like the 10th Amendment, those powers not specifically delegated to the federal government or reserved to the states. I think you can possibly include poker in there without any major issues for us as a regulatory body. And then the slots, $500 limit's kind of ridiculous. You know, let the public do what they want to do. If they want to play $25, let the casinos do what they want to do. I don't want to micromanage you all. I think you should be able to do whatever you want to do to thrive and increase the gross gaming revenue and therefore the tax base without us micromanaging. I think a lot of this stuff was being micromanaged back in the day by legislators and others. So I'm in full agreement. I thank you for your presentation, very informative. And I look forward to further insight and questioning and further information from you all.
You know, thank you, because you reminded me of a point I wanted to make. It should be left, I think, it should be left to the discretion of the licensee to put a property into private status, a room into private status is expensive. And so Charlie's not putting rooms into private status for somebody who just isn't gambling.
Mhm.
He's making a calculation that this person gambles this much over this period of time. It's going to take me 6 dealers and 3 supervisors or whatever the case may be. And he's calculating whether it makes sense for that particular customer to be in a private gaming salon. When you talk about poker, where you can have more people in, you know, it's a little easier to justify that. So it was a very good point that you made at the end. So I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I remember reading the legislative history, which sounds like you have, Ms. Whittemore, there was a comment made by a legislator that they didn't want this to become, and I'm going to paraphrase, every Saturday night, something like that. And so my question is less about the main patron, and you touched on the 6-hour versus a 24-hour, I believe you said, for the regulation, and then the group staying there after the primary person had left. Either one of you take this question, walk me through how's that good for Nevada? You touched a little bit on they're going to continue to play, and I understand poker, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more probably with you or maybe some other members who bring up poker. Can't stop a poker game. it's 6 hours. That doesn't work. Somebody playing baccarat or blackjack, you could tell them to take a break if the main person wasn't there. The main person, they can keep going because there is no 6 hour. But my specific question to you is, are you seeing that the group that comes with the main player really needs to stay that long? Are they playing at a high enough level, to Ms. Whittemore's point, that it's economically viable to keep them in a private salon?
Sure. I think it is. When you think about all the additions to the city from sports and entertainment options, I'm seeing more and more customers come with a group of friends or family members, and they absolutely deserve to be put in a private gaming salon, and they really enjoy that amenity. Um, but we, to Ellen's point, we keep that salon staffed the entire duration of their trip. And the real life example is that they'll be playing together, whether it's baccarat or blackjack. The main player may decide to call it a night, and the remaining customers will continue to play. Either way, we'll have that game staffed. And ultimately, what we do is have a conversation letting them know, and we won't wait till exactly 6 hours. It's generally more like 4 or 5 hours to say we're going to be closing the salon until this particular customer comes back, per our regulations. Sorry for the inconvenience. But these are customers that would continue to gamble, continue to generate revenue, and continue to drive loyalty for us, that are having a good time, and we're following all of the current regulations required.
Without getting into your proprietary business, are these non-primary patron players, after the primary leaves, how much are they wagering? And give me generalities. You don't have to give me specifics. I'm not talking, I'm
Sure.
guessing these are not $10 players, right?
No, to tell you what, it's a broad spectrum. Some of them are much smaller players that are, playing at a much smaller level than the big player that the salon was for. And some of them are close, maybe not quite at that $300,000 level, but below it, and that wouldn't currently qualify for private gaming. So it really does vary.
And what we're trying to do, right, is to encourage those customers to come to Nevada over anywhere else, right? And if they're able to bring their friends in to the private gaming salon and they say, wow, I've had enough. I'm going to go to bed, or I'm going to go eat at Delilah's, or I'm going to the nightclub. As long as we're still staffing that room, which we keep them available for really high rollers for 24 hours, might as well make some money while you have the dealer standing there, because you don't close the salon just because the guy's left, because he may change his mind, or she may change her mind and come back.
That's exactly what I was about to ask you. So you're saying that the 6 hour would make the friends and family leave, but you're saying right now you keep it available for 24 hours anyway, in case the primary player decides he's left the nightclub and wants to go back to gaming. Is that the point?
That's right. Occasionally, a customer may let us know, I'll be back in 18 hours at a particular time, but usually they march to their own beat, and we make sure that we're available in those private gaming salons at any time that they feel like they're ready to get back into action.
Dr. Watkins?
Yeah, just returning to the issue of including a poker game in the gaming salon. I would add that I agree with you that I don't necessarily think that NRS 463.4073 2B limits the games to slot machines and table games. But I also think that defining poker as a table game would require a lot of regulatory changes, especially as it relates to the ones that you built, the regulations you built, you say you created related to gross revenue calculations. I guess, Chair, if you don't mind, I'd like to give audit an opportunity, Chief LeBlanc, to come up and speak to, just for the sake of the record, the potential changes that might be required if we were to define poker as a table game. But I do think that the path of least resistance would be, as you mentioned, for us to interpret the statute as allowing us to allow the games that we want by regulation. So creating or changing the regulation to allow for poker so that wouldn't impact other card games and how we treat those card games and impact our revenue calculations as well.
I 100% agree with that. The path of least resistance. I would hate to make audit go through Reg 6 regulatory revision if it's not necessary.
And could be unintended consequences if we
That's
miss
right.
something, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
no, good. I'll let both of you sit down. Dr. Watkins, we will bring up Rusty and then we may have more questions for you, so don't leave.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both. So Chief-elect Rusty LeBlanc, you heard Dr. Watkins' question, and some of this is legal analysis, which we're not making decisions today. It's a discussion, but there has been some talk about whether or not poker would be a table game and what the ramifications would that be versus if there was a regulatory change or interpretation that just said we're adding a new game. But go ahead and tell us what that would impact on audit if it was changed, because obviously there's different collection and tax report.
My name is Rusty LeBlanc, Audit Division Deputy Chief. So right now our auditing procedures is we want to verify that revenue is properly reported. So right now table games, as Member Watkins mentioned, that we have a certain calculation for it. Card games, there's a certain calculation to calculate revenue for card game as well. So if they wanted to make card games part of table games, and then obviously that would change the calculation of revenue, and that would impact how we would go about our audits and making sure revenue is properly reported. We do have separate mix. We do have mix for card games and mix for table games. Ms. Whitmore did mention that there is table games mentioned in the card mix, but that's only related to drop procedures. Everything else is distinctly different as far as our controls that we require over each revenue section.
Thank you for that, Deputy Chief. That's an interpretation of whether or not, like you said, we're trying to say the table games, card games. What if, and this is way down the road, we're not making decisions today, but if we were to just say, as the statute says, the games offered, there has to be a regulation on the games offered. Would there be audit considerations if poker was allowed in a gaming salon? Would that change things, or is that on the licensee to just collect the proper amount of tax from a poker table, the same as they would on a floor versus a baccarat table on the floor?
Yeah, exactly. It would just be on the licensee to report. As far as gaming salons, the only different requirement we require is more statistical information as far as table games goes. But as far as everything else, there's really nothing that impacts us. We just require additional statistical reports from table games that are from gaming salons.
Ms. Whittemore mentioned potential of having tournaments in probably nicer locations, my words, not hers, but some of these salons are up on the highest floors of the casinos, tournaments up there, promotions. Does that impact audit if there's poker promotions, or is it the same as doing it on the floor that you would do up on the highest
It would be the
floor?
same as if they do it on the floor, as long as they have the rules and they clearly define like how the tournament rules are going to be handled. The only thing I could see is maybe if they're having certain promotions, let's say they have promotional pots that are on the floor, on the main casino floor, where patrons are actually contributing funds to these pots. If they're having these separate, I guess, or tournament promotions in the poker room in the high limit or gaming salons, I would want them to be also contributing to these pots if they're able to collect from some of these different promotions that are being contributed to on the gaming floor. So just be more transparency, I guess you could say, between what's happening in the gaming salon and what's happening on the poker floor.
Explain the reasoning behind that. Are you talking about mingling the pots that everybody gets the same chance at?
Yeah, exactly. So everyone gets the same chance to win those funds.
Good. Good. Thank you. Dr. Watkins?
Thank you, Chief-elect LeBlanc for
Thank you.
for explaining that and putting that on the record for us. I think I have gotten what I wanted to on the record as it relates to including poker in the salon, but can we turn to the issue of the private-public access?
Yeah. Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
So basically, what I'm hearing you say is you could do it,
Yes, we could do it.
no problem.
Yeah, no problem. Whatever you, the board decides, the commission decides, we can handle it on our end.
Great, thank you.
No
Audit
problem.
can do anything. Why don't we do this? Let's open it up to other members of the public. I'm starting to have some ideas that are popping into my head about enforcement, and we've got Chief Torgerson here, so I don't go anywhere. I may have some questions for you about accessibility and those type of things, but for now, anybody else who wants to come forward? Mr. Pohl, nice to see you.
Hello. My name's Chandler Pohl, for the record, Vice President, Legal Counsel at MGM Resorts, Chair Hendrick, Dr. Watkins, Judge Assad. So we looked at the legislative history as well, and I think there's an important part that would give us a different lens to look through when we look at gaming salons and what's changed since 2001. And at the legislative, in front of the Senate Committee on Judiciary, Mr. Fess, who was a lobbyist for MGM Mirage at the time, said, quote, "Those patrons," meaning the patrons who would go to gaming salons, "are accustomed to the highest standards of hospitality, which include," this is the important part, "security and privacy during their gaming activities." He went on to say, "which will allow for the first time Nevada casinos to operate on an equal playing field in attracting those customers to Nevada," which, going back, is the security and privacy. Mr. Timmons, who was president CEO of Aladdin at the time, added, "Not all patrons wish to be identified to the public." So 20 some years later, one thing that has changed: in 2001, in our pockets may have been Nokia phones, but in 2024, everyone has not only a cell phone, but a camera, a video camera, and a way to publish instantaneously to the world. So when we have some customers who have come and we say, "We can put you in a private room, but you have to meet one of these two criteria, the 300,000 front money or have a credit line." Some people don't have 300,000 on them, but these are the people who may also not want to be in public. And we would know that they would have the money, or we could say you can qualify by obtaining credit. And in this day and age, a lot of people say, "Thanks, but no thanks. I'm not interested in getting credit." So we say, then the best we can do is maybe put a velvet rope around you, but that doesn't stop the public from maybe interfering with their enjoyment of what Nevada has to offer. So I think that's an important lens to look through. And our requests for the board consider would be the admission criteria to be remove the financial threshold and say the admission criteria is the licensee's discretion. And there's the rule in 463.4076 that says admission to a salon may be restricted on the basis of the patron's financial criteria. There's nothing in the statute that says it has to be. So I think that's up to the board and commission to have the discretion to say, yes, it can be the licensee's discretion. And then the rule in Reg 5.202C, that's where we get into the 300,000 line of credit or front money. Through a workshop, that regulation could be revised to say licensee's discretion. And the rationale would be sometimes we have people who come in who are well known. The other thing that's happened is in the past 20 years, Nevada and Las Vegas has fundamentally changed as to who clientele is on a Monday night as opposed to a Saturday night and a Tuesday night. There are a lot of people in Vegas now due to sports or entertainers up and down the strip who are known patrons but are unwilling to have the 300,000 carried in cash as front money or to apply for the credit. So this is going back to how do we best cater these customers and how do we give them the privacy and security that we as a licensee would like to provide them and what we think is necessary to not cause public scenes on our gaming floors. So the first would be to put it in licensee's discretion for the financial threshold. And the second would be reiterating what Wynn has asked for, which is poker to be included as one of the games available into a salon. In addition, we would also say that we would like slot machines to be offered without having to have a table game in the room as well. So it'd be up to the licensee's discretion as to which games would be in the room. And it could either be a table, we say table and poker or slot. The 500 threshold, that's in statute under 463-4073. Minimum wagers for slots in a salon must be no less than 500. MGM doesn't object to the 500 threshold, so that would be fine for a slot machine. But if the board and commission wanted to lower that to a different amount or raise it to a different amount, that would be a statutory issue, not a regulatory issue. And then in terms of knowing who is coming in and out of these salons, already in Reg 5200-3A, licensee has a duty to maintain a log that contains the name of the patron, the time of entrance and exit. So we would always have a record. In addition, we'd have the surveillance footage of who was coming and going. And one of the issues in the legislative history in 2001 was, how do we know this just doesn't create a back door where people come in and out? And it's, well, we would have surveillance up to the standards as required. We'd also maintain the logs of who was entering and exiting. Those were our two main asks. Again, MGM is slightly different than other operators on the Strip. We have 4 properties right now that are currently approved. Of those 4 properties that are approved for salons, each of our properties has some that are private only and some that are public and private.
Thank you, Mr. Pohl. I've got a couple questions. You finished by saying there's some that are public and private. Are these on the floor, basically close to the main casino floor?
Generally, yes, depending on how you say close to the floor.
Understood. Yeah, not feet away, but yards away. Half a football field. How far away from the main floor did you say there is a private salon?
So private ones can be connected to a gaming floor, but generally our private ones have been somewhat disconnected from the main public gaming floor. Some are in sky suites above the floor. Cosmopolitan is an interesting one where there is a Talon room on a second floor, which is public gaming. And inside the Talon room, there would be public-private, but then there are also private in the sky areas. So generally private are disconnected from the public floor.
That's a good point. And you're adding to the fact of building a record here that some of this is going on already, right? It's just not the converting from public to private on a regular basis away from the floor, but there are examples that you just mentioned. One of the things that I'm going to ask the enforcement agents about is accessibility for the public, signage for the public, those kind of things. But I appreciate you bringing up that there are situations currently existing where there's private salons that aren't directly tied to the gaming floor. And then the Talon issue and some of the others. You heard the representatives from Wynn talk about the fact that they keep the salon available at I'm sure a very high level of cost. Does MGM do the same for your high rollers? And the reason I'm asking is, if we didn't have the $300,000 threshold, I'm sure that was designed, and I haven't seen the history, but I'm sure that was designed for, if we're going to allow this step in 2001, we want to be sure it creates tax revenue, because it was a change in 2001. Do you see that maybe the people who wouldn't meet that threshold, are they worth the cost of keeping a salon available? Are they that close to the 300,000, or are they more like, a $10,000 or $25,000 player? Doesn't seem to me to be economically viable. Seems to me that you're only going to open that up and spend the money if they're going to be bringing in play to your casino.
I think that's part of it. It would be, are the patrons worth it? I don't have anyone from property here who's in operations who can speak to that, but the operations team wanted to make sure it was clear that there are some people who may not have that 300,000, but because of who they are, our only available option is to put them on a public floor. And sometimes they might say, well, the other operator down the street has a public floor where I can be a bit more private than in your public floor. And Judge, to your point, back in the day, it was a velvet rope. And we've done that before, but it didn't solve the gawking and disturbing of the individual enjoying their stay in Vegas.
And on the poker issue, which is number 2 on our agenda, are you seeing that certain potential customers to MGM properties are saying, I'd love to play poker with my friends at a very high level per bet, but I can't do that in Nevada because you don't allow me to do that into salons. So I'm going to do it somewhere else, be that Beverly Hills, Monte Carlo, wherever else. Are we turning away business?
I think that there are those conversations that are happening. And the option right now is to put poker where it is on the public floor, but then you would have table limits. And if you say, well, there's a private party that wants to enjoy a table limit that's much higher, it's a lot easier to say we can put that over into a private space and maintain the public floor for either the non-celebrities or the non-people wishing to remain private, and still have the games available on the gaming floor for the traditional poker play.
Thank you. Board members, do you have questions for Mr. Pohl while we have him here?
Good afternoon, Mr. Paul. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So this question would be for both you and Ms. Whittemore. How significant is gaming salon revenue in comparison to overall gaming revenue? Do you have an understanding?
I don't have financial details in front of me, but it is substantial. The number of salons that we have that we use, 9, 8, 8, 16, 27. We have about 31 salons spread across 4 properties.
That's helpful. Thank you. And Ms. Whittemore is behind you as well, if she.
Yeah, I may ask it kind of in a different way, but I had similar thought. We know that there's a certain group of baccarat players that can affect a licensee's monthly revenue. I'm guessing that those particular individuals, whether you call them whales or high rollers, are just great people. Are they playing upstairs in the gaming salons?
Typically, yes.
Yeah. Ellen, I'm guessing that's where those people would be playing at Wynn.
Yeah, I just was getting clarification that we have 19 salons, some in private exclusively, some in public private, but we have 19 salons in our dual property. And I don't know the percentage of revenue, but I can tell you it's very significant.
Thank you.
Judge, questions for Mr. Pohl?
Thank you for that, Mr. Pohl. That was very good, very informative. Just to go through the checklist here. You're absolutely right. There are a lot of players that want privacy and security, and this is a great way to effectuate that. So I can speak from having dealt in the industry for a number of years that a lot of players just have to have that type of privacy. They don't want to be photographed. They don't want their picture floating out over the internet for a number of reasons. So I'm in total agreement with you there. I think the licensee should have discretion as to all of these issues that you've raised. It shouldn't be us micromanaging it. So I'm with you on that. The threshold limit, again, as I said earlier, it's insignificant for me. The casinos already do that anyways. They set certain limits for certain players. They set certain table limits to eliminate the riffraff, if you will, from a high roller that wants to play on a private game. They make it private by saying it's a $1,000 minimum bet. So let's just put aside all that nonsense and let you all operate the way you want to operate. Poker, it can be, as Mr. LeBlanc testified already, the gross gaming revenue can be assessed depending on whatever the rate is. A lot of poker players, as Ms. Whittemore suggested, do want to play sports. So they bring in other revenue to other areas of the casino. So that's a very good point. I represented a client when I was doing criminal defense He was a huge poker player and used to play in private rooms in the Bellagio, in the rooms, probably illegally. But poker games go on all the time in these private rooms. I don't know how we can regulate it. So why not put it out in the open into a private salon area so it can be surveilled? It can be, you have your mixes in place and you can tax the rake accordingly to what tax and audit can do. They said they can do it. I have total confidence in them that they can do it. The slots, you already do that. You have high limit slot areas anyways. So why not just take that theory and put it into the private salon area? You can put machines in there for whatever denomination you want. So I thank you for your presentation, and I look forward to having some more insight into this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I want to go back to a comment that Ms. Whittemore made that actually I'd been trying to figure out. The regulation says that there must be, and I'm going to read it here, ensure that all times the gaming salon is open to a patron for play, that at least one table game is available for play. And I always thought it was strange that if somebody wanted to play $1,000 coins in a slot machine in a gaming salon, there had to be a table game sitting in the room with a dealer standing there, and I didn't understand it. And I think, Ms. Whittemore, you provided me the historical basis, which I apologize on behalf of men. It sounds extremely sexist, but I gather that that makes sense, that they said, well, you can have a slot machine in there, but there's always got to be a table game. So yeah, interesting, and complete form over substance. Doesn't make any sense. If somebody wants to be in a gaming salon and play a lot of money into a slot machine, why make a table game and a dealer stand there? Very strange. Thank you. Good afternoon. Please step forward. Good to see you.
Thank you, Chair Hendrick, Dr. Watkins, Judge Assad. I'm Joe Lupo, president of Hard Rock Las Vegas. I wanted to be here and be on record to say that we fully support and I could not say it as articulately as Ms. Whittemore in the wind, but the proposal that's on for the board today in every way, shape, and form. Now, we are building, as you know, a new property, and coincidentally, I was here a year ago, just after we were licensed, and I met with Chief Torgerson, and one of the first questions I asked was, why is there a $300,000 limit to play in a private room? I've worked in two different jurisdictions, the Atlantic City and Florida. And while there wasn't necessarily private gaming, I've dealt with very high-end, some of the most famous world celebrities, artists, singers, sports celebrities. And after coming back to Las Vegas after 20 years, where the city has truly changed with the Raiders and F1 and Super Bowl. And I was asking some of the industry friends before Super Bowl and F1, where are you going to who are you going to house and how are you going to take care of the celebrities that really want private gaming? Now, they don't have 300,000, they might have 5,000, they might have 10,000. But I think in today's world, we have to look at Las Vegas a little bit bigger, as gaming revenue is only 35% of total revenue. But having these celebrities and being able to service, and I think this is really a service question, how do we service celebrities? How do we service the $1 million player who only has $100,000 left on his credit line? How do we service that player who says, my spouse wants to come see Taylor Swift this weekend. Can you take care of that party? I'll be back next weekend. So from a cost standpoint, I don't think, number one, it's not cost prohibitive. It's very cost effective to ensure that we service all of our customers, all of our, whether they are celebrities or whether they are friends and families of the larger whales, as you would call them. I think that's just a service amenity that in Las Vegas, we need to be a little bit more broader. It's great when the media and through social media and digital media today that the world sees everyone coming to Las Vegas, but taking care of them is a little bit different issue that we have below the confines of the casino, that to be able to take care of them and ensure a secure environment is really a secure, exclusive environment. Again, I've dealt with, I can think of a very famous young singer who, if we didn't control the 200 young women that were chasing after him, it was a secure issue. So to be able to provide that individual the opportunity to play a little bit, gamble a little bit, not 300,000, but play $5,000, $1,000, whatever their friends. And so that they would then come back, they'd have a good experience. They'd want to come back to Las Vegas in this case and enjoy what Las Vegas has to offer. I think it only makes sense. As well as I'm a proponent of poker in the private rooms, from celebrities to high-end players. There is incremental revenue when they play. They might put a couple dollars down on a blackjack table out in the public casino, but it's really about providing that safe, secure, exclusive environment where the public isn't gawking at them, and it's a more of a secure environment. That's all I have, but I just wanted to again definitely be on the record that we support this initiative.
Appreciate that, Mr. Lupo. Glad you're here. And as you stated, you're in the process of rebuilding right in the middle of the Las Vegas Strip. If we were to change the requirements, if the commission were to allow a change in these regulations, would that affect your building? Would you have, as you're probably designed now, I'm guessing that you're designed for some private salons,
We have.
and that would be ability to be public on the floor. Would this change your plans? Would it increase ability to bring in more high rollers?
We have designed and planned private gaming in our guitar tower, if I'm not mistaken, on the 36th floor, well high, hundreds of feet right above the Las Vegas Strip. So obviously from a competitive standpoint, we've designed a building that's very consistent with our friends and neighbors here on the Las Vegas Strip. So it wouldn't change that. Having more flexibility was my first question when I got here a year and a half ago. Why isn't it more flexible? Why does it take a $300,000 credit line? How can we make these special events, the Super Bowls, F1s, and everything else more flexible to again be more amenable to more individuals that are coming to Las Vegas, maybe not to gamble for 300,000, but to spend a lot of money and create those relationships from an entertainment standpoint. But to answer your direct question, no, it wouldn't change our design. We've reviewed some of the design with Chief 6 months or so ago, and we're pretty those stages are pretty well completed.
So a couple of different points. If you had private salons on the 36th floor and there wasn't a $300,000 requirement, you could attract more people that you're talking about that might be a little bit below that. But if you designed on the second issue, we're talking about a private salon up there, which could be converted into a public salon, open. You're probably going to hear, I'm going to ask the chief here some questions, which she may have asked you 6 months ago about access and signage and those type of things. That may be different because I'm guessing right now you're designing those as private salons, correct?
So I guess the question is, what's the definition of public and private? As long as we have accessibility and I think communicate to the public that salon is available, I think that would be the key to enabling any and whoever to play in those salons. Typically on a casino floor today, the floors are so big, you traverse through the back of some of the larger casinos, and the public rarely even knows they're back there, and the public doesn't go back there. It's a little intimidating to go back there. The tables are reserved typically, although they're not private, and they're not held for any one of the public other than the player who has the credit line that they felt deserves that table that supervisor and that dealer are sitting on. So
yeah, good point. And I think that's actually a great segue, and that other board members may have questions for you. So don't go away, but that's a great segue to Chief. I wanted to ask you, we're talking about access, and Mr. Lupo, you're free to sit down. I don't want to make you have to stand there. We might bring you back up with further questions. Thank you again. But Chief Torgerson, if we're going to be in a situation where my understanding is policy of the board for years has been that you make a decision, you're public or you're private, except if you're off of the gaming floor, and then it's a signage issue. You've heard this discussion already today, and we're going to have some more, but from an enforcement standpoint, tell us what things are going through your head that you would be concerned about for your agents to be able to properly regulate and enforce and be sure that Nevada is properly aligned if there was private or public salons away from the floor.
I think for me, it really comes down to, enforcing the public policy, 463.0129. I think it's the same for, the same goal in mind. And with that being said, I think that as long as there's proper controls, there's good transparency for the public and for the board, and we can ensure that proper supervision is implemented, I really don't have a lot of concerns at this point. I think we've had a long span of watching these salons, during their operations. I've seen a lot of evolution where, the licensees have stepped up. We've had some really good records as far as not a lot of problems during that period of time. And as you've noted probably as well, we've also reduced a lot of our standards. At one point in time, we had remote viewing, and it became quite a burden for staff and also an expense for the licensees. So we, went away from that, and we haven't had any problems since. We have logs in place. They have, but we don't have any affirmative notification at this point in time. Haven't had any complaints, any major problems, big cases. So I really feel that, the industry is on track. I think the licensees take it very seriously because they do want to give good service and security to their clients. And I feel that that's all a positive thing. Really comes down to, I think, signage and branding to make sure that the public is notified and that we have access as board agents to be able to go and observe when needed and also to audit appropriately.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Chief. There's several points in there. Let me see if I can remember some of them off the top of my head. I think you started with a really good point. When this law was passed, the Gaming Control Board had not just the right, the absolute notification opportunity to watch live via feed into gaming salons, correct?
Correct.
Things have evolved since then, right?
We have greatly.
We don't have the manpower, the personnel to sit there and watch multiple gaming salons play. So that went away, and now it's a maintenance requirement of the video, correct?
Yes.
And how many days does that?
45 days, at least 45 days.
45 for
Mhm.
private gaming salons.
Yes, correct.
When they're in a public situation, does it revert to the surveillance standards of public? I'm guessing, correct?
It would, but I have a feeling because it's a dual use space, a lot of times they're just doing the same retention because it makes sense to them. It gets difficult to manage, to deviate back and forth, but I've never asked that question.
Let me ask you another question on that. So 45 days, and this may be a question for the industry. If that's 20 years old, 45 days was probably a massive amount of storage 20 years ago. 45 days now is probably not that much storage. If you had an incident, are you seeing that you would know about it in 45 days, or would you say I need 50, 60 days to know about it and be sure it's retained?
Well, I know that at one point in time, I think it was 90 originally. It was 90 days and it got reduced to 45, which is another evolution that we experienced. And since then, we haven't had any problems with the 45 days.
So my guess is then you're getting notified immediately or day one, and it's not like you're finding out about it day 46, day 47. You're aware of it and you ask for the video to be produced to the game control board
Yeah,
agents.
although there's no guarantee of when we'll have the report and receive the report, I find that the supervision is so layered. You have, surveillance operators, you have pit people, you have, hospitality people in and out of those salons. You also have patrons, dealers. So I feel that there is a diverse group of people that do report because they know what's at stake. And I feel that there's integrity in that. Additionally, I think that, we don't have any concerns as far as access with, our agents. Obviously we have to do it overtly because we have to identify ourselves otherwise because it is a private venue. But we still have the ability to go to surveillance and, they are so generous in turning over cameras to us that we could sit at a table and we can actually watch just like we would have at the board offices previously. So I really think that all the tools are still there as long as the conditions are put in place properly.
Right. And I think you mentioned that you're just not seeing many of these incidents happen in gaming salons, which would seem to be logical, right? If these are high roller type people, they're probably going to have less incidents up in a place where they're expected to play a high level of play with their family and friends under tight surveillance in a closed environment. My guess is we have a lot more incidents from an enforcement standpoint on casino floors than we have in gaming salons.
Yes, correct. I mean, it being private, I think it's up to the licensee to set the tone for what's appropriate within that space. And I do see a concerted effort upon our licensees to do that.
Yeah, good. And you touched on something regarding when the salons are available to the public. Ease of access, obviously ease of access for our agents, but ease of access for the public as well.
Correct.
What's some of the things you go through when you're evaluating access to the public for a salon?
So one thing that is a consistent practice throughout is that with the dual use space, we actually impose like conditions for signage. And when it's being used in a public fashion, many of the licensees, we require them to, post that it's open for play. Because, it is confusing. Someone might see a closed door and think, oh, that's a space I can never enter. But then the next day, the doors are open, which is an indicator, of course, for public versus private. But also the signage is somewhat inviting. I would make a recommendation if we make changes in the future that I think we should standardize that signage and also really our guidelines on placement of signage to increase the transparency for branding and advertisement.
Good. And I assume probably the same thing if you're talking about the public trying to get up to a 36th floor, 68th floor, wherever it might be, that it needs to be clearly marked and not dissuading of the public to know that they can go up there and game. Now, the limits may be higher than what they can play if the minimum is 50, 500, whatever it might be, but they should have the ability to get up there without anybody blocking, for lack of a better word. Is that things you'd be looking for as well?
Most definitely. And I think, a lot of times we have our security professionals, they're in a uniform, they're maybe even armed. And sometimes that can be a little bit of an intimidating factor for patrons, especially if they're at a podium, where they're maybe, blocking or supervising entry to certain areas. So I would caution that, that look and that optic, we need to take a look at that and see what kind of guidelines we'd want to impose there. Many of the licensees today have security professionals that are not, in a full uniform or something like that. They're more in a suit. That's a little bit better. And I would encourage also access to these towers if there's going to be public gaming, that it could be a direct access for the public where maybe it wouldn't need to be supervised. Maybe, you could control an elevator bank where you would have a direct access from the public floor to the private or public area up above in the tower, and it wouldn't need to be supervised or possibly even escorted.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you had an elevator that had rooms going up second, third, fourth floor, they couldn't go up by themselves because they'd have to have a room key to get into that elevator. So there may need to be more of an express elevator or an ability that if the security, and you all in the industry are probably doing this already, but maybe security pushes the button that says you're on an express elevator, you go straight up, because otherwise somebody would have to escort them, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's possible, with the elevators today, but I would assume that there's that ability. But also, I think it comes down to training for our licensees as well with these security officers, the way they engage with the public, the optics of how they appear, and if they're an intimidating force or not. It should be a security person that's there to help and service, right? Not an intimidating factor to keep you from going somewhere necessarily. And with the proper signage nearby, and I think that marketing and advertisement, I think those things are mitigating factors for us and we could overcome the problem.
Great. Thank you for that. Great comments. Dr. Watkins, anything for Chief Torgerson?
Yes, I would first and foremost say, I agree with your commentary as it relates to the intimidating factor of security personnel standing in front of the elevators. I think I was just mentioning to you that I attended the gaming law conference last week, and I was confronted with security and to get up the elevator at a hotel, and I just wanted to turn around. I'm like, oh, the conference must not be up there, because that was just the first thought that came to my head, was that, that's a prohibited area, or, maybe that's for the people with room keys. But then somebody did approach me and say, hey, yes, the gaming law conference is this way. so I can understand how seeing security personnel prior to going to an area that's supposed to be publicly accessible could be intimidating for some people. But I would also say or ask, and I think you kind of answered this already through your answers to the chair's questions, but Ms. Menamore mentioned reducing the financial criteria that are required to get into the gaming salons. What kind of changes to security and surveillance will be required? I'm assuming you'd have many more people entering the salons. What kind of security changes or surveillance would be required for that?
I think that's hard to answer because it may be dependent upon the popularity of that venue and the reception of the public to that space. However, I'm very engaged with our security professionals. We meet monthly, and I know that they are constantly assessing, different areas within the casino and risk. And I think that, they are on it when it comes to managing their properties. So I don't really have a concern with that. I think that as far as a surveillance perspective, the cameras, the infrastructure is already in place. As far as if those go private to public, when we have surveillance coverage, it's a heightened level. It's a heightened condition with salons. It's much like a cage where you literally are capturing the whole area within the salon to include the ante rooms. So I don't think it would be a change at all for surveillance, and I trust our security professionals to handle that appropriately.
Okay. And you said I think you already mentioned that there's no typical language kind of provided on the signs so that language varies and that you recommend more uniformity in that language and more uniformity in the placement of signs so that people are very much aware that it's open and accessible to the public.
Yeah, I think that would be beneficial to the public because, as they travel from one property to another, they're going to start recognizing that, feeling more comfortable. I think in itself, it's a form of advertisement, right? If we get unified throughout our industry.
Understood. And then, Chair, if you allow, I have a couple questions for our industry professionals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Either Ms. Whittemore or
Mr. Lupo.
or Mr. Lupo or Mr. Pohl or our operations
Stone.
professional.
Mr. Stone. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Can you tell me how it works practically from the licensee standpoint to change how the decision is made and then the change is implemented to change a salon from private to publicly accessible space?
Charlie?
The main distinction would be that the door remains open when a gaming salon is in public versus private. All of our practices, policies, and procedures remain in place. We will notify surveillance when we have private gaming and fill out the proper paperwork for the Gaming Control Board.
So
Make the decision though. Like, how do you decide whether you're going to be private or public for a particular customer?
Well, $300,000 in front money. Sorry, apologize for that.
That's okay.
The $300,000 in front money or credit line is the first determining factor to make sure that they meet the criteria required. And if they do, and they want the private gaming, and then in addition, if we believe that they play to that level that benefits us, and we have the space to provide that room, we'll put it in play for them.
okay, so it's just really the financial criteria, they submit some kind of form or application or in the downstairs casino.
The customer will apply for credit
Mhm.
or send in money for front money, which if it's over $300,000 and they request a private gaming salon, they'll usually communicate through their casino host that that's something that they would like to have. And then it will come to the operations team to make.
Is
that
it
decision.
only through a casino host?
No, they
come in?
They can contact anybody in operations as well.
Okay.
As long as they make it known that they would like that, oftentimes we'll offer it to them if they play at a significant level to show them, again, a heightened level of service and amenities that we think may drive more loyalty with that guest.
And if the minimums are changed, either lessened or left to the discretion of the licensee. You're going to make those decisions based on the value that you attribute to that particular customer.
Mm.
So they may come for the first time and you don't know anything about them. And you say, no, I'm sorry, I don't know, whether you should be in a private or public, right? But then they may gamble to a point where the next time they come in and say, I'd like a private salon, you'd say, okay. So it's going to be based on the value of the customer to the casino.
Okay,
Typically, you know well in
Yeah.
advance that a $300,000 customer is coming to the property. So the preparation time is available for the team to open up the room, put the chips in the float, things like that, and prepare it, have security available, things like that, because you have to apply for credit typically or wire the money in. So the casino typically knows well in advance that we have a player that fits this criteria that may want private gaming.
okay, okay. Similar, Mr. Pohl?
Yes, that's similar, yeah.
Okay. So how long do you, how do you determine how long it's going to be open for? Is the customer saying, I want to keep this space open for 6 hours? Or is it more so that you all have determined how long is it going to be open for, irrespective of what the customer is specifically requesting?
Sure. So we know exactly how long they're going to be in town based on the reservation. Sometimes customers extend, sometimes customers leave early. But generally speaking, we'll keep the salon open and available to them for the duration of their stay. At some point, they may give us notification, I'm leaving town, I'm finished playing. They sign their markers if needed, and we'll close gaming in the salon and send us.
And are other people able to access this salon during that person's stay? Like, let's say they're not, okay, so it's completely closed to that single patron, the entire, okay.
The way that it currently is, that is the qualified salon guest is there. We open for that guest, then they gamble for however long they're going to gamble. Then we have the 6 hours at the end of it, right?
Mhm.
So that 6 hours at the end, you may have somebody else, but I couldn't walk in and say, hey, I'm a friend of Joe's and he was just here and I want to be in the private salon. I would have had to come with Joe and been in the salon with him, assuming
Understood.
Joe's my customer.
Thus multiple salons. So you can
Mhm.
have multiple players play in their own dedicated salon.
Okay,
Chandler Poll for the record, but I think it's important to note that sometimes it's not guests with reservations, sometimes it's locals who
okay.
come down to property. And to get that process, that's not necessarily an immediate or quick process, but if we had the elimination of the financial, then it could be a much quicker process.
Mhm. So what would you say to us? I'm just trying to think this all through practically, to play it through like a customer who, let's say sometimes it's open, sometimes it's a private gaming salon, and sometimes it's accessible to the public, who is complaining that, they're traveling up to the 60-something floor and it's closed because it's now only privately accessible.
Well, so in most circumstances, if it's in private, but let's use us as an example. If we're in private, the public cannot go to private because it would require a room key. Those towers are for those guests in that tower and the guests that are entitled to a private. So you would, I don't think you would ever have the circumstance where somebody mistakenly got to the top thinking that they would be able to gamble and they
Understood.
couldn't.
And so you would, it sounds like you would have to change the whole elevator configuration if you change the salon to publicly accessible.
You would.
And it's
You would, I'm going to use us as an example. Everybody's a little bit different, but our tower is behind a door. It's the tower suites. It's a more exclusive tower. You would go in. We do not have our security officers in uniforms. They're in uniforms, not they're in suits,
Not
not
uniform.
uniforms, right? And so you would either have them have a key to just say, welcome, let me do this and turn it, or you could, depending on the configuration, have one elevator bank that only went to the top and didn't stop on any of the floors, right? So that's how you would access it. But what you would, we all recognize that in our signage, we would have to have something that said, gaming available in the Sky Casino 60th floor. So that as people walk to that area, they would see that they were able to go. They were able to go up to the Sky Casino when it was in a public status. And that's the same whether, I think sometimes we focus on where these are located, they're high, but you have a second floor, you have places that are really not adjacent to the casino, they're down hallways, back outside, right? If they're in public, we as licensees have a responsibility to ensure that we have the appropriate signage, and I'd welcome a discussion about a standardization. We need to let people know when those salons are in public status that they are welcome. And that's a requirement, and we all will have to do that.
Yeah, understood, and thank you for that. It just seems like it would take a lot of coordination, like putting up, taking down signs.
Yeah. It will.
Changing the elevator configuration. You would really have to be coordinated operationally to make sure, this gets, and not saying that obviously it can be done, but just to your point.
We do it now we have a number of our salons that are private/public, and we can turn them into public. And what most recently, the board's conditioning those approvals to say that there's a certain signage that has to be up. So we already are able to convert private to public. So what you're talking about, the locations that are not on the ground floor, I hate to say casino floor because some of the salons are really far away. So if you have salons that are not on the ground floor, you certainly are going to have to make sure that you give wayfinding to the customers to let them know that there's a casino open on your top floor. But that's true with the current configurations on some of the strip where there's public gaming on the 60th floor already, on the top floor, right? And so enforcement has said, this is what you have to do to make sure people know that they can go up and gamble on the top floor. So to me, what we're really talking about is the mechanics of making sure that those top floor locations, the people know that they can go, because we're all used to flipping our salons from private to public. And in that, I was going to say, I think the chief mentioned, in a private salon, we have to keep surveillance for 45 days. When we flip that to public, we don't change the time that we keep the surveillance because it's just mechanically silly. So if we have a salon 1 on the main casino floor, if it's in private, we keep for 45 days. If it's in public, we keep it for 45 days.
That was my next question. So thank you for answering that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but it's really the overriding issue, I think, is to make sure that the public knows that they have access and that they're not intimidated from that access. And so I think as you're looking at potential regulations or conditions on licenses, and I kind of do welcome the idea of having some standardization, right? That you look and say, in that particular circumstance, if I'm a customer walking in Wynn and I want to go to the Sky Casino, well, it'd be Encore because Casino's in Encore. But if I go in Encore, I know how to get there. That there's there's something that says there's a casino at the top.
Okay, thank you. Did anybody else want to respond to any of those questions?
I would just state, I wouldn't anticipate, this won't flip-flop from public to private every day, every hour, anything like that. I would envision, and I don't want to speak for anyone else, but from my standpoint, it would be public far less than it would be private. It would be public for those weekends, those special events, when there's more public demand. We certainly don't want to push the public somewhere where we might have a $5 million player that would be to keep that reserved for the better players. But on those certain occasions when When there is a big weekend here in Las Vegas and we have that demand to make it public, then we would take that opportunity to state probably public for a longer period of time, change the casino signage out. And I think it would be something it'd be just very easy and consistent to follow.
Okay.
I totally agree with that. We think that those places that are private are generally private. They're open to that kind of a location would generally remain private.
Chandler Poll, for the record, I think this may address Chair Hendrick's question earlier about where privates are located. So our privates that are private only, they can only be operated as private, are off of the public areas of the casino floor. Those are usually in sky towers, which the public doesn't have access to those floors. So that's why those are only allowed to be operated as private. The ones that are near the casino floor that are tangential to the public floor, those are the ones that can switch back between public and private.
Right, but the proposal is here today is to allow for public-private access on the higher level floors.
That's correct. And the precedent for that is that there are approved gaming floors for the public on the top floor of resorts right now.
Is it one or multiple?
I know of one. I don't know how many. Chief Torgerson.
I don't know exactly how many exist. It's one gaming area up there.
That
and
was my understanding.
Yeah,
It's just one
exactly.
on a high level floor where it's publicly open to the public. for
I think
gaming.
you and I might have toured that actually at one point, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so they did, I think they have restricted, the number of hours because of staffing and demand. But, I do have the conditions historically of what we required for that public access and the gaming to be on that floor. And it's been working very well. I don't think we've had any major complaints or disputes that I know of.
But in that space doesn't go back and forth between public, private, it's just public.
It is
right?
not a licensed salon. It is
Right.
public gaming space
Right.
in the tower. And I believe that Supervisor Rob Nickel is here with me as well today. But Rob, didn't you go out recently to review the conditions and look at the signage that was present? Could you speak to that?
That's correct. Robert Nickel for the record. That area is a public area only, so it is not at any time currently a salon. They do have signage indicating that's open to the public and an elevator that provides public access there, so the public can access that area.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
And I think our position is that everything that we do to convert private to public on the main level of the casino, we would do to convert private to public, and the location of the salon shouldn't determine whether it can go to public, so long as we make sure that the public is aware that it is in public status and that they can go.
And that is open and accessible.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Chair, may I just add one thing?
Yes, please.
We've had some historical things as far as non-salon, but use of space and access to the public. So historically, we've seen requests from Venetian Palazzo in their Lavo restaurant. They asked to have gaming upstairs from the restaurant. And we went through that as far as branding, advertisement, signage. I don't know that that was a long-term concept or how successful it was, but we did go through those motions and we had success there. They did have an elevator that was separate, going straight up to that area outside of going through the restaurant and up the stairs. So that's one example. I think the Talon Club too, as was noted at Cosmopolitan, that was something I worked with Frank Schreck and Lainey Castle on from the very beginning. And as far as incorporating the right signage and branding, throughout the property, like, with the directories, right? And having the signage be somewhat permanent, just to advertise that to the public. So I think we've seen, use of public space in awkward areas and having to make that transparency. And we've had those historical precedents. Yeah.
Great. Thank you all. I want to open it up to anybody else in the audience who wants to come forward and speak on either item number 1 or number 2. Ms. Valentine, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Virginia Valentine from Nevada Resort Association. So good afternoon, Dr. Watkins, Judge Assad, Chair Hendrick. You have heard from a few of our members today. The Resort Association does have represent about 75 resorts statewide. I do want to underscore, emphasize some of the points and the question, I think you started with, Chair, is how does this benefit the state? And so just to add some emphasis, and also because what you do when you change or amend these regulations affects all the operators in the state. Just let you know that the input and the feedback I've had from everywhere across the state has been very positive. We have members who may operate just one property, members who operate a whole bunch of properties in Nevada, people who operate regionally, and people who operate globally. So there is consensus on this issue. The $300,000 limit, for example, is a barrier really, or at least very limiting for, I think, for some of those properties in Northern Nevada. So we're hopeful if you make some changes there, there'll be recognition that the idea of a salon gamer is not the same in every market, in every season, and maybe even depending on what other kind of events are happening in town. So I think even back in 2001, when these regulations were, state law was being amended for some of the salons, there was some mention there of being competitive. And now that gaming, of course, continues to spread across the globe, and a couple of the people who spoke before me mentioned how this evolution now of the kind of player we used to have to now the kind of guest we get with sports, special events, super entertainments. We're getting much more diverse group of people who really value their personal security and their privacy. And so I think to stay on the cutting edge here, these kind of changes will make it possible to attract people who may be going somewhere else, who are looking for a unique or a kind of a curated experience when they come in for an F1. And so all of those things I think are going to be benefits, not just to the state in terms of revenue. They're going to benefit other sources of revenue than gaming. I think the hotel, the restaurant, the retail, the LAT, all of those things should benefit also. And then of course the guests now can have an elevated experience. And I think this is the kind of, I think, innovative change that can help keep us on the cutting edge. So again, I just want to say after 2 decades, a lot has changed, and we really appreciate you bringing forward these workshops, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Valentine. Yeah, excellent comments. Anyone else from the public wishing to make public comment? Madam Secretary, is there anyone in Carson City wishing to make public comment regarding item number 1 or number 2?
There is not.
Okay. Board members, anything else on items 1 or 2?
I'll just add that, I'm constantly in awe of, the industry, our licensees' ability and creativity, just reshaping the industry as a whole and imagining things anew and pushing forward, new ideas to change regulations. You all are just so brilliant and creative. And thank you for being here today. And thank you for helping us continue to reimagine the industry.
Judge?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Hendricks. Appreciate all the comments. Basically, the issue of access to the higher floors and so forth, I think it's already been kind of taken care of. You go to the foundation room, they have a way of getting up there. You go to the Fountain Blue, you want to get up to their private area in the top floor. They have a membership program, then they have a public area also, but they have a way of getting up there. The Signature Towers, the Wynn and the Encore have ability to do that. The Ghost Bar at the Palms, they have a way of getting up there with the elevators and signage and all that. So that's not a problem. That's not an issue. They've been doing it. They can do it. As far as the licensee discretion regarding the 300,000, I think that was a ill-advised requirement back in the day. There's no need for it today. I think the resort industry is, as Ms. Valentine said, would be better served if we could eliminate that completely and allow the industry to do what they need to do and thrive. You look at other jurisdictions, if we don't get ahead of the curve on this, players can go to New Jersey, Monte Carlo, Macau, Dubai. They can go anywhere and find a private salon or whatever they need to do to satisfy their desire to gamble and privacy and security. So I think it's important and imperative that we get ahead of the curve on this. I would just ask the industry to maybe collaborate together and draft up some regulation that you would like, and if need be, something for the legislature to amend 463, 4073 to include poker along with the slot machines and table games. And I look forward to working with you to effectuate this and get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. And I also want to thank everybody for showing up today and providing comments on this. As I mentioned when we started, I hear some of these things that licensees will bring up, or agents will tell me that a licensee has brought up about different comments. And that's why I love these kind of sessions where we can have this conversation in public. The room isn't full today, but I'm guessing there's a lot of people watching on YouTube who are very interested in this. All the stakeholders should have the opportunity to listen and to provide input. As the agenda says, this was for discussion only, so thank you all for the discussion. As we mentioned, there's a few things we would have to talk about for regulatory purposes. I don't believe the legislative changes are necessary at all. I believe this is a regulatory change. Actually, I believe the chair could do some of these based on the regulations as currently drafted. But to my fellow board members, I always try to include them in everything. So I wouldn't have taken the opportunity to not have this conversation either publicly here today or publicly in a board meeting to be sure that everybody gets input. And so again, I thank you for that. And we should, as the judge mentioned, if the industry or any stakeholders have comments, suggestions about regulatory changes, things that we mentioned today about ease of access, if there's public salon activity, got to be easy to find. Signage can point them in the right direction, easy to get to. Those are things we go through, and we should take a chance after 20 years to be sure that our enforcement ability is as available as possible. Sounds like it is. Ms. Wardemore's comments that her properties are saving the surveillance tapes for the same amount of time, whether it's public or private. I think that should be something that's necessary so that we don't have to guess as enforcement whether or not it was in public status or private status. Save the video for the same. And it's on our agenda today for that's one of the things that the regulations require: surveillance and security. We talked a lot about security for these patrons, and I get that. If you're playing a high level of gaming in Nevada, you want to be sure that if you're moving cash around, whether it be through a marker or something else, and somebody sees that you're playing a high level of money, we got to be sure that we protect our customers in the state of Nevada and that they feel secure when they come here. So personally, for me, thank you all. I think this was a great conversation starting point. The next step in this would be we need to look at what regulatory changes would need to be done with the help of the Attorney General's office and everybody here from enforcement, audit, and of course the industry. So I'm hoping that that happens over the next couple of weeks or months, and we can see where this goes. Thank you all. Because this is discussion only, we don't need any vote or anything. Madam Secretary, does the court reporter need a brief break before we go into our third item, or should we move forward? Or board members, if you need a break?
I'm good.
Good?
Good.
All right, Madam Secretary,
We're good
I'm
to,
okay. Thank you.
you're okay. All right, very good. We will keep moving then and go into our third item, Madam Secretary.
Our next item is the discussion regarding service providers, including without limitation, establishing registration requirements for sports data service providers pursuant to Nevada Gaming Commission Regulation 5.240.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Again, this is for discussion purposes only, and this is very similar to the other two items, is something that I've heard about, and I know that the board had regulatory workshops on this maybe more than 2 years ago. And really, to me, the question has arisen on, do we have enough visibility and knowledge of everyone involved in the sports wagering business? As time has evolved, are we making sure that those who are involved in setting the lines, providing the data, are they captured within our regulatory process? I'm not saying they're not, they might completely be, but I've heard these conversations. And again, my attitude is always, let's have a public conversation about it. Let's invite everybody to listen to the discussion. And then of course, provide comments to us if there needs to be changes. This one fits under service provider to me. And I know I've got Chief Barbie. I asked you to come today because you've been here long enough to have heard this discussion back when there was regulatory workshops about it. And I would just turn the floor over to you with a broad topic of, should there be a new category of service provider? And if so, what would be good for Nevada? How would this protect regulation? And are we doing it well enough today, or is there something maybe we should look at?
Great. Thank you, Chairman. Jim Barbie, I'm the Chief of the Technology Division. A little bit of history on this. We did have some workshops back in 2022 to discuss this, among other changes to the service provider regulations. And the genesis for the conversation is the current regulatory and statutory environment was created at a time when there were fewer players in the sports wagering space than there are today. When our statutory and regulatory structure was created, there were fundamentally, outside of the patron themselves, there were fundamentally three entities involved. You had the event itself, you had the information service who would monitor those events and create lines and odds information that would then ultimately be consumed by the operator. As sports wagering has evolved, the number and type of events have also evolved to offer an increasing more number of events, as well as other types of events, for example, both pre-game and in-game type of wagers. So there's a new entity who has emerged that is somewhat between the information service and the actual event itself. You will have these entities, and we've introduced the term, or just for discussion, I believe we were calling it a sports data service provider. That's just a placeholder name. Obviously, as this matures, we can find out or we can work on the name. But these entities are those that are a little closer to the actual event than the information service is. The information service is actually ingesting this information from these third parties instead of monitoring those events themselves. And what we see is that information, because of the volume, is being consumed systematically and passed through from these third parties through the information service, and oftentimes directly onto the operator without a lot of interaction between the information service. So there's a little bit of risk that comes along with having these third parties be able to establish event information, including line and odds information, that ultimately end up in front of the patron where they can place wagers. Under our current structure, we regulate the operator, that's a licensee, they go through the licensing process, and we regulate the information service. They also go through the licensing process. The proposal here is to consider regulating those third parties as a service provider. Now, that would require only a registration, but it would bring those entities under our regulatory purview, both giving us the opportunity up front to evaluate their suitability and probity to operate in our space, as well as long-term, should something unfortunate occur, it would give us an opportunity to work directly with those entities to try and resolve whatever that issue might be. But fundamentally, that's what's gotten us here today.
Thank you for that, Chief. That's a great explanation of what we have on the agenda and a little bit of regulatory history that I wasn't here for. I have heard that the groups you're talking about, at least anecdotally, are licensed or registered in other states. So I don't know exactly who these groups are. But my guess is it wouldn't surprise them if Nevada said you needed to be registered. Is that kind of your understanding, as you've heard from other jurisdictions as well?
Yes, Chairman, that's my understanding as well. For example, New Jersey does have, they consider these entities, an entity that requires, I believe they're called an ancillary casino service entity, something along those lines. And they go through a registration process to operate in New Jersey. So I don't believe this would be something that would put them off from doing business or continuing to do business here in Nevada. And again, we're talking about bringing them in at the lowest level entry point via a registration into our space.
Yeah, that's a good point. And what we're trying to do is be sure that we have transparency and accountability from a group that may be, as you said, I think you defined it very well. There may be another group out there between our licensed operators, our licensed information service, right? So if there's a group out there that's providing information to those, they should have a nexus and a connection to with the Nevada Gaming Control Board. Don't know if that's not happening. I know our licensees would not be doing business with anybody that was doing anything nefarious, who wasn't completely above board, because there's a absolute responsibility on the licensees. But why wouldn't the Gaming Control Board want to know who those groups are as well?
No, I completely agree, Chair. I've full confidence that our licensees are doing their due diligence on the entities that they're operating with. I think by bringing these entities, though, under the registration process and under the purview of the Gaming Control Board, this gives us the opportunity, in addition to the probity checks that the licensees have done, to do our own sanity check. But it also gives us the authority and tools on the back end that should something go wrong, we can work directly with those third parties. As it stands right now, our visibility stops at the information service. It doesn't extend into these third-party entities and give us the ability to work directly with them.
That's a great point. Not saying that anything bad would happen, but we need to know who to call immediately, right? Instead of calling our licensee and saying, we don't know who you work with, that group, whoever it may be, would be registered. So excellent point. Let me go ahead, don't go anywhere, Chief, but let me open it up to anybody in the public. And let me start by asking, Madam Secretary, did we receive any public comments regarding item number 3 on our agenda?
We did not.
Thank you. Is there anyone in Carson City, Madam Secretary, who wants to provide comments regarding item number 3?
There is no one.
Right, thank you. Anybody here in Las Vegas who wish to make public comment or provide any testimony regarding item number 3? All right, seeing number 2. Nobody here then, Chief, we're right back to you. Board members, questions for Chief Barbie about what he's kind of laid out for us, historical or going forward wise?
Good afternoon, Chief Barbie. How are you?
I'm doing great this afternoon, Member Watkins, and you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. So you mentioned that the benefits to us were that this would kind of give us the opportunity to examine the probity of these third parties, but also allow us to work directly with these third parties. Do you see any other benefits, additional benefits to us registering them?
Those are definitely the principal benefits, but I think also possibly just from a reputational benefit to the state, that should one of these entities, something unfortunate happen and these entities are operating in our jurisdiction without our, for lack of a better term, oversight or regulatory authority over, that there's a potential for regulatory harm there. Fortunately, we haven't found ourselves in that situation up to this point, but I would suggest that there's a potential risk there.
And you said that these types of third-party entities are currently being registered in New Jersey. Is that correct?
Yes, Member Watkins, they are.
Are there other jurisdictions that you're aware of where they're?
Unfortunately, my research was limited to New Jersey on that because New Jersey has most of their licensees, they're publicly available, so I was quickly able to access that. I'm not certain, but if other jurisdictions, as they've brought sports wagering online, if they've also pulled these entities under their regulatory purview, without a little bit further research to give you a firm answer on that.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have right now.
Without putting you on spot too much, Chief, you mentioned that in the unfortunate event that something bad were to happen right now, if we didn't have a nexus or connection at all to the groups that are providing some of this data, can you maybe give us a hypothetical of what that would be? I'm thinking off the top of my head that there may be data coming in from some soccer matches, tennis matches, something happens and that data is being provided to a licensee. Is that where you're saying that something bad could happen if, again, not accusing anybody, not making any allegations that anything is wrong, but if there was, perhaps it's a glitch rather than anything, and the information was bad rather than information was intentionally bad?
Yes, thank you for clarifying that, Chairman. I would say that we would be talking about something that's not necessarily nefarious, but something that may be more of a systematic issue. Let's say a line was misset. Perhaps it was too high, too low. An event didn't close when it should have, something along those lines. Right now, how we would handle that process is start with our licensee. Then we move along to the information service. And at that point, the information service would go, well, our feed provider that we were using, they had a hitch in to get along with their product. We don't have the authority right now to encourage that third party to give us access to that information. So we're limited in that scope to conduct a full investigation there.
That's a great example. Yeah, thank you for that, Chief. Judge, do you have questions for Chief Barbie, since he's the only one who's on the hot seat this afternoon?
Thank you, Chairman Hendrick. I do. So by way of definition of a service provider, is Don Best a service provider?
Judge, I'm not certain if Don Best is currently licensed as an information service, but to your point, or to address something relative to your point, the goal here is to capture those entities that are providing feed information, not necessarily website information, to licensed information services and licensed operators. Don Best, as I understand it, and I could be mistaken, but Don Best, as I understand it, offers a website that you can subscribe to. So if I'm an operator or if I'm an information service and I'm a trader, I can have my Don Best information up on the screen to assist me in making whatever information or make whatever decisions I'm looking to make. The entity that we're looking to capture with this definition is not that type of entity. It's the entity that provides an application interface that I, as an information service or as a race and sports pool manufacturer, have integrated their product feed into my system so that it's a systematic processing of that information. That's who we're looking to capture. So I think if we were to move forward with any kind of regulation, we would want to ensure that we've been clear in that regulation from a policy standpoint, who it applies to.
Is Don Best registered with the gaming board?
Judge, I'm sorry, I don't know, sir.
How about Jim Feist Sports?
I'm not certain if Jim Feist is, or if I believe Eugene Bootnanny is another one of those entities who may at some point have provided line and odds information. Unfortunately, I just don't know at this point.
How about Bet365?
They are not, to my knowledge.
Not a service provider?
They are not.
Okay, and what about Maddox Sports?
As far as a licensed information service, they are not, to my knowledge.
So they wouldn't have to be registered with the board?
Under the current definition of an information service,
Right.
those entities would not meet that definition.
Right.
Under the definition that we come about through regulation for a sports data service provider, that may require those entities to come under our purview. So again, that would be dependent on what they're offering.
Who is setting the initial line after the football games are over on Sunday? Who sets the initial line? Where does that line come from for the following week?
I think there's a plethora of sources for that, Judge. That could come from the licensee themselves, the licensed operator. It could come from assistance from their information service. The information service could take, let's say, data that sporting entities, those sanctioning bodies like the NBA, the NFL, or the NHL, they provide stats. The information service could take that information, crunch those numbers, and translate that into an opening line. And just as a quick side note, the intention of this is not to capture those entities that provide sport statistics. So we're not looking to capture, NBA, for example, because they're providing statistics.
Okay.
But back to your question, so that opening line could be set by the operator, the information service, or in some instances, these third parties that we're referring to can establish an opening line, both pregame as well as for in-play wagering. They can establish what those lines could be. And as it flows systematically through the information service, that line might be the line that ultimately shows up in front of the patron. So I do think that there is the possibility for some of these entities that don't currently come under our purview to set those opening lines. With the understanding that ultimately it is the gaming licensee, the licensed sports pool operator, that establishes their lines.
Somebody has to set the opening line for all the casinos. Who would that be?
Well, it would be one of those parties that I was suggesting there. It's either the casino that's operating the book. Ultimately, it is their responsibility for that opening line, but they could set it themselves. They could rely on their information service to provide what those opening lines should be. Or in some instances, these third parties could be providing opening line information that the licensee accepts.
So can you give me an example of a third party, one of those third parties?
There are a handful of third parties out there, and I don't want to suggest that anybody that I name right now would immediately require some level of registration, because it would require us to understand what it is, the information that's being provided. But there are several entities out there, such as, Genius Bet, Sport Radar, L Sports. There are a handful that provide opening line information and in-play information.
So who sets the in-game lines after a game is started? Would these companies, Genius and Sports Radar, or is it a separate provider?
Though if that's a service that they offer, then yes, I believe that those entities could be doing that today and may be doing that either here in Nevada or in other jurisdictions.
So we're going to have to define what and who those third parties are, right? If you want to capture them by way of registration.
Definitely, sir, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I think, Chief, you gave a great example a while ago. You mentioned a professional sports organization, specifically the NBA, but it could be any of those. They're providing data, stats. That's not what we mean by sports data, and not what we're trying to capture, correct?
Correct. And that's why I wanted to say the name is a placeholder at the moment. We don't want to confuse what we're looking to capture there. So we would potentially noodle on the name a little bit
Great
further.
example, because we don't need all the sports organizations calling us and saying, what's Nevada trying to do? I'm just keeping track of the stats for my organization. It's really the next step, right? It's who takes that information, and then I believe you said turns it into a line. And if that's a licensed information service, we already know who they are. If it's somebody outside of that, that's the group we're trying to figure out who they are and have a connection with them, correct?
Exactly, Chairman.
Great. Thank you for that. Dr. Watkins?
I would like to get Chief Barbie out of the hot seat. And I would like to ask Mr. Michaela to step into it, if you don't mind. As it currently relates to disciplinary matters, can you speak to how at the present moment we would seek recourse against these third parties for failure to comply or any other issues? Can we only resolve those issues through our operators or through our licensed information services and potentially their failure to manage or something of that sort? And how might that change if they are required to be registered, wouldn't we be able to seek any potential discipline against them directly?
Thank you, Member Watkins. Right now, we have jurisdiction only over those entities which are licensed, found suitable, or registered with us. So as long as these using the current term of art sports data service providers are not crossing the line into a position where they would be required to be registered, licensed, or found suitable, I don't know that we could really go after them at all. Our hook would be into the information service for using the problematic information or being associated with perhaps problematic individuals providing them the information.
Right, so it's, I guess for lack of a better term, would be more of a mismanagement issue as it relates to our currently licensed or registered entities. I was going to ask you something else and I do not remember anymore. Oh, I do remember now, sorry. So, I mean, I guess maybe this question isn't for you, maybe I just make a statement, but you know, this could potentially be better for certain licensed information services because these third parties can be held directly responsible was, I guess, the point I was trying to make, instead of us seeking that resolution of any non-compliance through our licensed information service. Not that they wouldn't ever potentially have some co-liability, but just that was the thought.
Right. If these entities were registered, the board would have a hook into them to discipline them, probably better term jurisdiction over them. And as you said, that wouldn't excuse our current information services, because they would still have to be diligent in, you know, what sorts of information they're accepting and who they're dealing with.
And I think it even goes beyond that. Good point you brought up, Dr. Watkins, is not just about jurisdiction, but it's accessibility. If we entered into a situation where we were trying to get information from a licensed information service, they absolutely have to give us the information. But what if they were saying, I don't have that information. It's actually this service I use, understanding it's their duty to help us. But if that group said, I'm busy, I don't have time to get back to you, that's a lot different than being a current registered entity with the state of Nevada. They'll get back to us a lot faster.
Can I add, I'd use the example of these third parties providing information to an information service. I do want to put out there for consideration when we craft regulation, if we make that the next step, that these third parties could also be providing that information directly to the licensed sports pool operator, but just not be providing it in a way that captures that entity under the definition of an information service. I think the current definition of an information services provides and sells or something along those lines. There may be ways of getting that information to the licensed operator that doesn't fall under the sell category, for example. They might be doing it in some other fashion. So using the information service as the example, I don't want to be putting the information service in the hot seat that they're the intermediary between these third parties and the rest of the system. These third parties that we're talking about here could be providing this information directly to the sports pool operator as well.
That's a great point, Chief Barbie. And if we move forward into drafting and Senior Deputy McKella, keep that in mind. If there's something else that's currently in statute or regulation that needs to be properly drafted to capture what we're looking into, if we move into drafting, let's be sure we keep that in mind, keep that on our to-do list. Thank you for bringing that up. Judge, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that. So Mr. Michaelis said that we already have jurisdiction over the service providers, right? Because they were already registered with us.
So Judge, we have, and this is where it gets a little confusing when we talk about information services and service providers. That word service, there's some overlap there. but an information service is a licensee. A service provider will be a registrant.
Okay, so we have jurisdiction over the information service providers.
There is no, it's an information service. We currently have jurisdiction over them because they're required to be licensed.
Right, so they're licensed, they're information service providers.
No, Judge, they're an information service provider, and I apologize for being pedantic.
What the hell's the difference? They're an information service.
Involved in the drafting of this thing years ago. So you license this information service.
Give me an example. What are we talking about? Who's an information service?
A licensed information service, I
No,
believe.
give me the name of one.
Stadium Technology.
Okay, so
the
Stadium,
licensed
to
information service.
follow up on Dr. Watkins's question about jurisdiction if something goes awry. All right, so Stadium Technology is an information service. We have jurisdiction over them because they're licensed, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, so if you have a sports data service provider giving them some misinformation, can't we hold Stadium Technology liable since they're a licensee?
We certainly can.
So my point is, we have a lot of regulations already. Do we really need another regulation when we can go after the Stadium Technology or the licensee? For example, the MGM or Stations Property or Wynn or whoever. Why do we need to have another regulation? I think we have too many regulations already. If we already have jurisdiction to go after Stadium Technology or another information service who's licensed by us, why do we need to be redundant?
Judge, I'm not gonna attempt to justify the regulation. I guess let me put it this way. We have seen examples in the past where these third parties have had an impact on gaming operations. We don't have the ability to look under their hood to see what's going on there. The legislature did give us broad authority as far as service providers go, that there's a lot of entities out there now that the legislature couldn't necessarily foresee who they might be. So they created this service provider category and gave the commission a broad authority to capture these entities that may in some form impact the overall integrity of the gaming industry. This is an area of growth where we've seen these third parties that are providing this opening line information. That's more and more common in the space, and we just simply don't have any oversight or insight into what they're doing or how they do it. I would leave, and this is what I meant by not defending the regulation, I would leave the whether or not there needs to be a regulation for it for you to deliberate on it as far as you're making your recommendations. But that's the genesis for us bringing this forward as a potential talking point for regulation. Is there are these entities out there that do have the ability to impact, the integrity and reputational integrity overall for gaming in the state of Nevada. Bring it to your attention and leave it to you how you would like to move forward with that.
But here's a hypothetical. So the Stadium Technology, who's the licensee, they're the information service. They provide the information to, say, MGM or Wynn or Caesars or whoever. So if you're going to bring in this third party as someone who we can have jurisdiction over, and then something goes awry, and everybody's just going to be pointing the finger at everybody else. We go after MGM and Caesars. Well, you got to go after Stadium Technology. They're the ones that gave us the information. You go after Stadium Technology, they're going to say, oh, no, you got to go after Genius or Sports Radar because they gave us the information. I just don't see the point. I think we already have enough people to go after. You can go after the licensee, the casino, the hotel, the sports book, William Hill, whoever, or you can go after Stadium Technology. And they're the deep pockets anyway. So that's the person we would want to go after if there was some misinformation or something nefarious that took place. I just don't think we need another regulation since we already have a ton of regulations anyways. That's my point.
I think though, Judge, it's you defined actually what could happen without having this other group that we know is out there and we don't know a lot about them. Somebody could point the finger at them, and I honestly don't know their phone number right now. And if they were registered, we'd know their phone number. I will say though that regarding regulations, I'm 100% behind you. I've said on the record many times, I'm all about reducing regulations. In fact, one of the board's bills going in front of the legislature this session will actually be seeking to reduce the number of service providers. So we're actually trying to help that in terms of statutes. So Mr. Ross, if there's anything you want to add on that, feel free, but it's not on our agenda today. I'm just pointing out that big fan of reducing regulation. This is to me, perhaps if we decide to draft this up, a chance to just capture entities out there that don't have a straight nexus with the Gaming Control Board.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And also, I feel it's our obligation to bring this to your attention as those who do help effectuate those regulatory changes, that this is the nature of the operation of the gaming space, and then you act on it as you see fit.
Yeah, and let me be clear also for the record, Chief Barbie, I know this wasn't a technology topic, and so I appreciate you coming forward and sitting down with us today. I believe when this was brought up several years ago, it's more of an enforcement topic. It was who does the enforcement division have an opportunity to call or to call forward when the day may come that we need information from them. Am I correct on that?
You're correct,
That's
Chair.
what I thought. So I appreciate you sitting on the hot seat and providing us with all the historical information. And if we decide to move forward with this, absolutely want to hear from all stakeholders. And of course, we'll be involved in that conversation, enforcement and all other divisions. Anything else from board members?
Sorry, I turned my mic off rather than on. You know, the judge brings up an important point about adding a regulation which would require, you know, additional resources from the board. And I asked about benefits, but I guess I didn't adequately ask about potential drawbacks to this regulation, obviously, other than what the judge has intimated that, you know, this is additional resources from the board, will require additional resources from the board. Do we have an understanding of what additional resources or how significant?
Member Watkins, I believe in the space that we're talking about, we would measure this in the tens of entities that are coming, you know, less than 20, less than 15. I don't have an exact count. Obviously, it would be dependent on the services that they offer, but I don't know. I don't want to speak for our investigations division and the registration unit on what they might need if we were to move forward with this, but I don't think we would see an exceptional amount of drain on our resources to process these registrations.
Okay, thank you for that. That's all I have, Chair.
Great question, though. We have a limited number of agents and our registration unit is stretched very thin. So something we should absolutely take into consideration as we decide whether or not to move forward with drafting something up. Excellent point. Judge, anything else?
I'm good. Thank you.
Great. Chief Barbie, anything else you'd like to add?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Great. Thank you again for your time and presenting this for us. And I believe nobody else in the audience had comments. All right, then, again, this was only on for discussion, so there's no action required. Madam Secretary, that brings us to, I believe, our final public comment section, correct?
Correct. This item is placed on the agenda to give the public an opportunity to comment on gaming-related matters. Anyone wishing to address the board may do so at this time. Comments by each person are limited to 3 minutes as a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction. If board members ask questions of the speaker, the time needed to address those questions will not count against the speaker's 3-minute time period. If speakers have any handouts or written copies of verbal comments to provide for the record, please hand them to the enforcement agent in the room.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to make public comment?
There is not.
All right. Anybody in Las Vegas wishing to make public comment this afternoon? Seeing none, that'll close our public comment. Yes. Oh, Judge, I didn't allow you to make public comment, please.
Or the doctor?
Or Doctor. I was moving very fast. Go ahead, Judge.
I just want to thank Sebastian Ross for his hard work and the research and the time and effort he put into this, along with Chief Barbie. It's dedication to the job. Thank you all for everything you do and helping to prepare us so that we can have an intelligent and lively discussion.
Thank you. Dr. Watkins, anything?
I will add my thanks to Chief Barbie, to Sebastian Ross, Chief-elect LeBlanc, Ms. Shelley Newell, I think it's DC, Rob Nickel, who all helped to prep and provide information and research prior to this workshop. Thank you all.
And thank you both, members. You stole my thunder there. So yes, absolutely. I was going to say thank you to everyone and Senior Policy Counsel Ross for putting this together on short notice, and all the agents who not only worked with us and provided us with information about what was on our agenda today, but as Dr. Watkins pointed out, if these move forward to regulation, it will be upon all the agents who actually has to make it happen and make it work smoothly with the industry. So in advance of that, thank you all. Also want to thank Clark County for letting us use their beautiful commission chamber room. Very appreciative of always allowing us and the commission to use your room. And thank you to all of you for being here or watching online, and happy holidays to everybody. We are adjourned.